All right, good. Thank you so much. It's the experiencer path, which I think is very important to note that it's not just individual experiences, but it's also a collective experience that's going on. So as humanity has been on the path of embracing diversity, one last minority is still unrecognized: experiencers. Untold millions of people are experiencers, witnesses, contactees, and are ridiculed, marginalized, harassed, and verbally attacked regularly. Each experiencer contends with the fact that his or her experiences are discounted and extreme social pressure comes to bear with the intention to utterly silence his or her voice. The question is why? I think it is because our collective experiences challenge a long-standing system of control, the rule of the few at the expense of the many. This power elite has played itself out, has had its chance, but the marker of mature planetary leadership is to provide for each and every member adequately, to provision each member with adequate housing, food, water, healthcare, education, and to see to it that each person can develop his or her highest potential. Humanity has been isolated, and in this isolation has become resistant to change, resistant to altering habits of the mind. Therefore, I believe that some protocol, some map has been created to integrate humanity into Paradigm Galactic. Many worlds have been aided in this awareness. Paradigm Galactic civilizations know how to assist hierarchically managed worlds, and that's exactly what our planetary government system really is. I think the protocol is to let as many beings that are able experience many different aspects of the idiomaterial existence in dimensions near to this manifest reality. I call this the experiencer path to disclosure. Interaction with extraterrestrial civilizations is comparative anthropology. If we find out that other civilizations manage their resources better than we do, that is threatening to those who manufacture scarcity here on this planet. The ravages of war, non-renewable energy sources, planned obsolescence, privatization, and degradation of resources, the soil, the water, and the air, are all facets of manufactured scarcity. Units of money count the scarcity. If a resource is abundant, it does not need to be monetized. We are being guided to transition to an abundance-based society because the planet can no longer sustain this addiction to scarcity thinking. Experiencers are being helped to be messengers, guides, agents of change, being given the context necessary to understand the up-leveling of humanity. There is a long-standing protocol in place to introduce us to Paradigm Galactic using the experiencer's path. It is only our consensus reality show, that's what I call it, a matrix view now programming us through controlled media that suggests our experiences are aberrant or abnormal. Through the investigation of the testimony of others, I think it is revealed that the experiencer path, that it is the experiencer path that constitutes disclosure. Almost everyone has had a paranormal event. So common it should be considered within the normal range of human experience. Without context or because of marginalization, those experiences are mislabeled paranormal, weird, strange, bizarre, anomalies, etc. The conclusion I have come to on my journey is that the metaphysical events in my life are instructive, enlightening, intriguing, useful, mysterious, yes, but I wouldn't want to erase them from my memory bank for anything. My earliest contact experience was a gentle guiding voice that I thought was God, the Holy Spirit, my guardian angel. Religion was my context. Early on, I found that when I put my attention on something, I suddenly had a flood of information pouring into my mind. This information was mostly just related, but not always useful to my present reality. When I was young, I learned I couldn't tell the grown-ups around me what I was downloading. It was like I had an external hard drive of information that I couldn't integrate into my normal life. Later, I would understand why this was happening to me when I met up with A.R. Borden, who was an insider, a renegade physicist, intuitive, and experiencer. From Borden, I learned the term idiomaterial physics. This term is more specific than quantum hologram to me because it refers to how things manifest from thought to material manifestation through 7 levels, each adding frequencies. What that means is that underlying each discrete or individual material object is an algorithm made from thought, an idea, or the ideo aspect. Idiomaterial physics is related to the quantum hologram in that this is a physics of energy rather than particles, but starting with thought potential. The concept that the quantum hologram is manifesting within the medium of consciousness is powerfully instructive. Many concepts in the paranormal experience are made more understandable. Along with our becoming aware of other intelligences in the cosmos, it seems that humans are expanding their knowledge of themselves as multidimensional beings. Okay, here's where I get into my personal experience path. It's been a very enlightening journey. My first large experience that's written, you know, in neon for me is a sighting in 1979. I was 18 years old at the time. We were visiting my godparents at the time, and my godfather, he was a locksmith, and I used to hang out at his studio and help him, you know, make keys, and it was just a very interesting shop. And he got a call to go out to a location where a man had tried to start his car and his key snapped in the lock. So he said, why don't you come with me and I'll show you how I do that kind of work. So we hopped in his big van with all the key making materials in the back. It was his roving locksmith van, and we headed out east of Salem, Oregon, for, I don't know, about a 20-minute drive. And we got to the location, and he got a magnet and got the key out and made a new key. And we got back into the van, and it was dusk. So it was probably about 8 o'clock. And we were heading back west, and so the sun was setting. And right as we're looking at the sunset, we saw something that looked like a plane on fire. It had a peculiar orange and pink lights on it. And as it got closer to us, it was coming over us, over the highway, paralleling just about the height of when you see a small plane that gets ready to land at an airport. And what happened was the as it got closer and closer, we began to realize this was not an airplane. It's been a long time coming for me to sort of explain the shape of this craft, but it was basically a star tetrahedron shape. So it wasn't anything aerodynamic that could fly normally. It was moving faster. We got out of the van, actually, and he turned off the engine. And basically, it was completely silent. It was going faster than like a jet plane would go. It had these pink lights, and this is what I understand as an image from the Rendlesham Forest sighting, but it was close, you know, very close. It had pink lights on all the points of the star, as it were, and it had a glowing red center. And it took me a while, just like last year, that I realized I was partially looking inside the craft because it seemed to be cloaked or had some kind of partial cloaking that was going on. So you could literally see the exoskeleton, if you will, of this craft, and it looked like copper piping. And that was kind of coming in and out. So it was you know, your brain is trying to make sense of this thing. One thought that I had at the time was that that current summer, the first Skylab that NASA had put up was in a deteriorating orbit. So it was in all the papers, and everybody thought that this craft was going to land on their house or something. So everyone was following the story very closely, and they didn't know where this thing was going to crash. So that was one thought that I had as it was, you know, pretty far away, that it might be Skylab crashing. And I thought, oh, this is going to be real exciting. We're going to see, well, maybe it'll crash on us. And I got worried. But it actually just flew silently over us and off, you know, straight along the highway path and back over us flying east. And it you know, of course, the closer it got, it didn't look like Skylab at all. And just in case, I checked the newspaper the next day, and it had this chart of where Skylab was located that day. And basically Skylab at that particular time, 8 p.m. Pacific time, was actually over Australia. So obviously I wasn't looking at Skylab, but and it was a little too close, you know. So it was this absolute wow experience for me. And then I was just like that guy in Close Encounters of the Third Kind. I had to know everything there was to know about UFOs. So I just looked everything up, but I began to feel a suppression of my enthusiasm, partially because of my parental and religious background. And I'll explain a little bit about my father, because he's a big influence in me. My father believed in political conspiracy theories, but not in UFOs. I was kind of on my own to figure this out for myself. And my ultra-religious programming did not give me a way to context my experiences. So I didn't try. And after a while, I just gave up. I just was in college. I wanted to, you know, do my college career and do my profession, which later became computer science. And this just became a nuisance to me. It became something that didn't fit in my reality. And I didn't remember some of my earlier experiences, which some of what Misha Johnston was talking about, I did have some of those, but I'm going to be mostly talking about my experiences and my contact stuff. So, but yeah, that was, I realized later in life that I was being monitored because of my contact ability. So I had this downloading, and it continued. But life happens, and in its way, life is its own greatest teacher. I had pushed all that aside, but things were happening to bring it back to the surface. I had a really hard road for many years. My awakening experience happened when I was 45, so I had a lot of things happen to me. My first marriage, I was a survivor of domestic abuse, and my third child was born with severe disabilities. She was born with spina bifida, and I spent a lot of years trying to keep her, you know, alive and go through surgeries and all that. And once I finally got her into a care situation, that's when you know, my life just, you know, empty nest stopped, you know, as a mom. And I said, I really want to know about this. These experiences made me question all that I knew. So one of my self-help methods had been journaling all through my life. And I began to feel a prompting to write messages down that I was hearing telepathically. At first it was just bits and starts, and am I really hearing this? And the first part of my automatic writing was just, you know, am I really hearing this? What is happening? And these beings, which they call themselves to me, they call themselves the Joyous, explained to me what telepathy was and how I was receiving this information. And I was really receiving some kind of psychic impression that I translated into my own words as I did journaling. And that was a huge help, because I really didn't believe this was happening, but I could just read it right there and go, nope, that's not me. So yes, that really helped. This began one of the most intellectually and spiritually fulfilling guidance that helped me to integrate my experiences. Okay, so at 45 years of age, I know Misha talked about implants. I actually had an experience of the implant breaking, and it was suppressing my ability to understand this stuff. And this is when all of this flooded into me, and I became aware that I was telepathic and could telepathically make contact. As I expanded my awareness, I also explored the buried by culture indigenous part of my family. My father is from the Cherokee background, and my mother has Potomac Indian in her background. In those cultures, being psychically gifted or being able to speak to ancestors or spirits was a valued ability. In fact, the first beings I made contact with were native ancestors. The first, a spirit calling herself Grandmother Wheel, and I can voice channel her by saying these words, these keywords, the wheel turns. And she was an amazing being that has helped me understand the divine feminine. She has such a strong impression of Mother Earth, and she is so old, I guess, that she thinks of all of us as just little children, and she's a lot of fun. But mostly she talked about your hands, and it was an amazing thing. She said, you know, you think things in your mind, but it's really your hands that enter manifest reality and manipulate it. So, you know, it was watching what do you do with your hands, what do you do with your mind and your hands, and I learned a lot. Also, later I made contact with a shaman native grandfather spirit called Standing Cloud, and I go, well, clouds always move, and he goes, some don't. And I had this picture of this saucer-shaped cloud because, of course, the native, our native ancestors encountered sky beings and star beings and believed themselves related as our sky family. And so when I was making contact with a being that was basically the consciousness of a dipolar star, along came Standing Cloud to help me understand it, because this was very, very confusing contact. And he came and helped me, get grounded and understand what it was I was looking at. And these two ancestors have helped me so much in my personal life, understand my experiences, and stay balanced as a human being, because our culture doesn't really help us with that. This is one of my contacts. This is Mr. Green, a green-gray being who is one of my most recent contacts. And my ability to interact with Mr. Green is based on the idea that fragmentations of individuation is illusory. So you begin to feel a bit melded in a sense with these beings that you contact, as if it's your other self. And I really got that feeling when I was interacting with Mr. Green, that we are multidimensional parts of each other. And one of my other research areas is the Apollo era lunar missions, and ostensibly Mr. Green is a green-gray who lives on Luna Base, which is on the opposite side of the moon, and he kind of plays 20 questions with me. In other words, he won't really tell me something directly. I have to ask a question, an intelligently thought out question, and say, is this really true? And then he gives me some information. So he kind of plays cat and mouse with me, but he's very delightful and has a good personality and spirit. Another being, I don't have a good picture. This is best I could do. That I was in contact with was Tobats, and he was a large insectoid being that was on a spaceship. His own civilization does not make spaceships. They only send a few individual beings onto other spaceships to be part of science teams and science missions. And they are very, very xenophobic and germophobic is his race. So once they go on a spaceship and go off planet, they're not allowed to come back to the surface of their planet, well, under the surface of the planet, because that's where they live. They have to stay on a base that's outside their planet. And so just an amazing being. He was equally amazed with me, because our planet, it's so hot that water does not retain its liquid state like we have on our oceans. What happens is the water is always kind of in a steam format. So basically, the telepathic contact was, he looked through my eyes at I was living on a boat at the time, at the water, and how it was on the surface of the planet. He thought it was very interesting. And I would look through his eyes at either the spaceship that he was in or memories of his planet that he lived on. And it was a wonderful interchange, comparative, anthropology. And like I said, appearances can be deceiving, as this very large being had such a loving spirit. And as species, we're especially confused why our planet allowed children to be abused or neglected. And that was, boy, an embarrassment to me to be a human being and know that that's in fact true, is that we have an economic system that allows many, many people to be poor, and especially for children. They would never allow that on their planet. They revere their children and have, a very different system of child rearing than we do. And I had no answer for why that was so. And we must understand that the ills of our society are being observed by others. And that should really make us think about what we do as human beings. One of my main contacts is Godesh, and this isn't a great picture of him, but it's a simulation. This is my Anunnaki contact, which happened to me a couple of years into my automatic writing. And this was a huge, first of all, his spiritual energy for me is huge. It's like talking to a giant tall uncle. And he identified as Anunnaki. He claims that he's a convert to the pro-human faction. So the Anunnaki, as I understand it, some of them want to keep humans in a subservient and slave state, and to maybe even let us be wiped out. One time they did in the Great Flood. And other Anunnaki have dealt with this directly, and they have a different feeling about us, almost a parental feeling, which is a strong feeling I get from from him. And he claims that his change of what he saw of the humans was that he saw a spark of the divine in them. And then he said something totally strange, and it took me a while to find out about this. He said when he was 9 feet tall, he had adult onset growth to 12 feet. So he said when I was 9 feet tall, I didn't think very much of humans. And then when I turned 12 feet tall, I had a change of heart about humans. And I thought, well, 9 feet tall, 12 feet tall, what's that about? I happened to be hearing Charles Hall being interviewed about his interaction with the tall white beings just outside of Vegas. And he said that they indeed had adult onset growth. In humans, that's called Marfan syndrome. Akhenaten was supposedly a victim of that, although he could have just been an alien. But also President Lincoln had this adult onset growth, and it's really unhealthy because your heart and your lung size and your organs are set, and yet now you've increased in mass, and your heart and your lungs and your organs have to work harder, and it usually hastens the death of the person who have this condition, like Andre the Giant and Abraham Lincoln. They said probably if he wasn't assassinated would have died fairly young. So that's what he said, is that somehow he achieved this enlightenment about humans, as maybe perhaps he was, facing death. It's hard to say. He told me he was a warrior or a general, and that was really helpful because he basically told me the mindset of a warrior, how to fight the fight. And most of the fight of a warrior is between their ears, right? In the art of war, it's how you think of things and how you keep yourself calm under pressure and all of that, which was really helpful to me. I have suffered on and off with anxiety disorder and PTSD my whole life, and so I really took that in, and it really strengthened me. So that was a big part of what he wanted me to learn from him. He said he was a direct ancestor to me. He wanted to call me my little daughter because, of course, I'm little. I'm only 5'5", and I said, no, I'm not digging that. So he calls me little sister, and so even I can voice channel him. And when he's talking to other people, he says, be careful with little sister, or treat little sister nice, and it's pleasant. I know I'm a relative of some kind. And I think the other thing that was really important to me, being a domestic abuse victim, was to understand the divine masculine, because I had really warped, fractured views of the divine feminine and the divine masculine, and that balance that needs to be struck. And I learned so much from Godi Godesh, and I found out his name. Godi means warrior, chieftain warrior in the old Nordic languages, and Godesh in the ancient Hebrew language, or Kadesh, means set apart one, or holy, or to be set apart, something that's special. So even his name that he gave me was something that I could go to town researching and learn so much from. I was told in my automatic writing that I had been impeded in some way, and that I was being accelerated in my awareness to be where I needed to be for my mission. And boy, howdy, that was true. What happened was I had this incredible up-leveling. I had this acceleration of downloading, and it was amazing and enlightening, but it was also kind of difficult, because as soon as, even while I was waking up, things were flooding into my mind. Even in my dream state, I felt like I was going to night school, university. All through the day, I had information coming to me, and I could barely process it. It was really flooding in and helping me understand that all this stuff that I had been learning all these years pertained to this time period and to the situation of planet Earth. And so, yeah, I absolutely went through this kind of process, as many people have told me that they've been through too. And it starts with, we are not alone. We have never been alone in the cosmos, which is a comforting thought and perhaps a little scary at the same time. But generally speaking, I believe it is a positive thing, as there are negatively service to self beings, just like there's negative service to self human beings. So, generally speaking, though, it's nice to know the cosmos is filled with positive and mature civilizations. The universe is more complex than we are told by the leaders in our collective. They don't tell us anything. And we're shown by media and society something I call the consensus reality show. And consensus reality is, we all agree in these principles of what reality is. Unfortunately, in that agreement, anything psychic or ufology or exopolitics or contact or abduct, any of this fringe stuff, that's exactly what they say. They say it's fringe. And it's show. It's media driven. It's driven by a media that is the mainstream media, or lamestream media, as some people call it, basically to show us what I think is kind of a boring worldview where, you know, you can indulge in all the fiction you want to in baseball and sports and, you know, anything you want to keep your mind off the fact that your reality is a bit mundane and you got to go to work every day and you suffer through trying to pay all your bills. And, you know, they'd make, you know, all this information an escape. And then you have, you know, programs or television shows or news things which push all of these paranormal experiences off to the edge and say that's weird, that's strange. It's a genre, the weird, the strange, the paranormal. And people who have those experiences every day, like myself and many of the people speaking, I like to say all my normal is para. You know what I'm saying? All my normal is paranormal because I'm having experiences at kind of this low-level hum of contact and downloading all the time. And then when I meditate, often I get into those times of you know, interacting. I did some of that today and yesterday just to be ready to talk to you. And it's, you know, it's basically going into the INNERNET, internet, going from inside and then into the broad external and then connecting with the, you know, basically our internet is a mini-me version of the real interconnectivity of beings. And we're being taught how that works by our technology. And that's something hopefully I can go into at another time. And they're taking space and they're making it fiction. I mean, most people, I'm just old enough to remember the Apollo era. And, you know, it was all on television. It was all a television program to us, the greatest show on earth. So, but kids, people younger than me, this was fiction to them. It was back in street, might as well be, you know, some other historical event. One thing I would say is much of the fiction that we connect to, particularly science fiction, is actually been, the writers and the producers have been tipped off by either the secret military or by being contactees or going to channelers. They've been tipped off to what ultimately is galactic history, but it's being shown to us as fiction. And our history story has plot holes in it. The history we get in school, the history that's the mainstream history, omits an awful lot. Often we also have a family history. You know, I have a few family members I've been able to get into this psychic topic with, and now my grandmother and my mother, I've been able to get a bit of the psychic history of our family and find out from our Native American and Irish, you know, combo of DNA, there was really a lot of abilities that were, you know, squashed because it was uncomfortable for everyone around them. But we actually are a family that's very in tune. Our DNA, we have several family members who pursued this. I'm one of them, to know, you know, just that family history. But also our, you know, run-of-the-mill history, of course, is written by the victors of all the wars, and it's slanted that way. And they want to give us, first of all, a very truncated history. There's a whole galactic history and then Earth history. There's a whole bunch of things that happen before either evolution, the millions of years, or the creation story. There's, you know, a third option. There's galactic history. And we're being informed by our science fiction about galactic history. I've delved into this. I know that the Star Trek universe is somewhat reflective of this history, particularly the Prime Directive, which is why we're being introduced to all of this very slowly. The Saga of Dune, I believe the spice, and I researched this and asked a researcher named Dan Winter, spice is monoatomic gold. So take that and run with it, because that's a very interesting part of the story. And it does pertain as well to the Anunnaki. Star Wars is also the history of the Orion Empire. So, you know, the Empire, right, strikes back. It was the Orion Empire. So it might be a, you know, a creative licensed version, but that is the basis of the story. And I hope you look into it, because the real history of humanity is far more interesting in the fringes and the alternative. Okay, as Misha clearly demonstrated, the military has the keen interest in experiences, though they would deny it. And I was recently, well, I live in New Mexico, and today I'm coming to you from the Pacific Northwest. In New Mexico, I went to a MUFON meeting, and I heard the speakers on the topic of, is the military investigating UFOs? And these were mainstream investigators, and they said no. And I was like, I don't think that's true, because I had many, many instances of interference in my work, computers going down at weird moments. Misha talked about her phone going dead. I've had my phone have weird noises on it. I've absolutely can say from my own experience that I'm very interesting to them, as maybe some of you are. And many experiencers know they're being handled as assets under management. And I'll explain that term. What that is they're going to give us a disclosure, but it's going to be a controlled disclosure. They're going to tell us what they want us to know. And it's experiencers who actually know what's really true. And if in case they flub it up, in case they get it wrong, they keep us on hand to get it right. I do believe that's what an asset under management is. So many of you wonder, like, how am I even alive after some of the scare-raising incidences I've been through? It's because you're being held in reserve. You're being protected, maybe even feel the protection. I have definitely felt the protection of my beings and my guides, and as a result, I'm here for a reason. About 2 years ago, I had an experience. One of my abilities as a psychic is knowing when family members were going to pass away. I was a caregiver for several family members, and I found out it was my turn. I felt it. I could see it almost in my mind. And an intervention happened, and I'm still here, and I really believe it was my guides saying, you're not done with your mission yet, I'm going to help you. And our guides have instigated, the government, the secret government, has instigated programs to keep us in the fringe zone, to keep us off base, but there's no stopping our reunion, because it truly is a reunion, with Paradigm Galactic, our families in space. We can cultivate the knowing, the shared realm of thought and ideas, and take on the quest we have been given. And my guides have given me wonderful phrases to understand ideas and to use tools of the mind. And this is one area that I feel that what the downloads are for, is to begin to give us tools of the mind to shake ourselves out of allegiance to the consensus reality show, and to help us, get our minds one by one, get those strings off of us like we're puppets, to cut those strings. And one mind tool I learned is the question, is the quest I own. And one of the things that the world runs on is question, answer, question, answer. We have experts, we ask the question, we get an answer. But this type of question is the open-ended question. It's the question where you get the information and you refine and you ask better questions. And the basis of that, philosophically, is Socrates. That's what he would do. He taught by asking questions, and that got his students to think for themselves and to look into themselves and look around them and to answer their own questions. And part of this, the quest I own, is the answer. And I swear to solemnly tell the truth as best as I can. An answer kind of forces an end point, really. You know what I mean? An answer is, the best that I know up to this point. It's and swear, I swear, and swear that this is so. Oftentimes we get shoved into a position of, as we begin to share our experiences, that I've got to have all the proof and all the answers right now for somebody who's skeptical and questioning us, but we don't. We're a work in progress. We're still trying to understand it. And the people who are demanding an answer or demanding proof, those people are doing something that I've called the credibility maneuver. So instead of just hearing the story, which is just your story, right? It's just what you're seeing. They start to question your credibility. And I know a lot of experiencers have felt this, being under the microscope and being a little tiny microbe on the slide feeling when they've talked to other people. And one thing I would encourage is know as much as you can about your own story. And the goal is to become an integrated experiencer. And what that is somebody who knows, who's integrated their experiencers into their personal life to the point where they've got confidence and nobody's going to tell them how it is. So ultimately, I believe our bodies are vessels of an internal spirit, learning and growing in awareness, initiating from source, experiencing, and ultimately returning to that infinite intelligence. And this is going to be the end of my slideshow, but I'm going to spend another minute on that credibility thing because I went through quick. And as my guides always say, and I always write this out in my, automatic writing journal, thank you for this interaction. And that is my email. Anyone can email me. I'd be glad to talk to them. I'm going to go ahead and stop the share. And here I am, and talk to you about this, okay, you've had experiences, you're trying to learn about it. I just recently banged heads with yet another person who was really in my grill about my experiences and what's going on. And I kind of had to just be quiet and let them tell me how it was. And that happens a lot. We go through an awful lot of negativity that's kind of built in. And one of the first things I encourage people to look into is something called the Robertson panel. And also the Robinson panel in particular was when the government did a think tank group, and they said, okay, how are we going to handle this UFO thing, right? And they were very nervous because the Air Force needed to have control of our skies, particularly after World War II, when we were dealing with the World War itself, and then the Cold War after. There was this need for dominance in the sky. And there was all these things flitting around that could move many times faster than the fastest plane that we had. And so people were seeing them and freaking out, and they had also decided we can't handle the truth, right? So they did this panel, and they decided to dispel the UFO phenomenon and marginalize it. This was a planned event, and it was coordinated with the military and our media, our consensus reality show. And what they did was, begin to create a script. And you've all seen it. Let's say there was a big UFO sighting in your town, something like what happened to Phoenix with the Phoenix Lights, okay? They'll put that report at the end of the broadcast with all the color stories, like the pandas gave birth and the latest, dance craze and all that sort of thing. They'll put it at the end, and they've been very serious about the news and very serious about the weather and kind of happy about the sports. But they put that at the end, and their tone changes to an incredulity, and you've all heard it. Okay, so let's hear what this report is about. Somebody saw a UFO. Let's hear that report. It's out of this world. They have all these puns and statements that they make. And they make jokes about little green men, and they will play some kind of theme song from either the X-Files or Star Trek or, Outer Limits or something like that, and just kind of joke it up and laugh about it. And I call that the treatment. It's the media treatment to make light of what probably was a profound experience for someone on the ground, whoever the witness is. They try to make the witness seem a little crazy or off, or they'll make fun of their profession if they were a farmer or, something like that, if they weren't, a first responder like police or a fireman or a military person. And they're always looking for credibility, and they're always being skeptical, and that's fine. That is a particular modality of exploration. People in ufology are in that process of trying to scientifically investigate that, and I respect that. However, we're 60 plus years out from Roswell, and I recently went to Roswell this last year and was at the museum and saw all the exhibits, and it's like, in 60 years, this is a statement they made at the beginning of the Obama administration, or the second Obama administration. They made a statement that there is no credible evidence that there is UFOs. Well, thank you so much for all of us experiencers. Thank you for giving us nothing. So you know what? They've discredited themselves as far as I'm concerned. I think the ball is rolling for an experiencer movement. And as I begin to look at the pattern of contact, I realize we don't have to have the government tell us anything. Half the people would not believe whatever president told president told us anything, because he's the wrong party, right up there, you know. But after this election, whoever it is, whoever's the president, if they get told to disclose, half the people will believe them, you know, just based on how elections go. They're so divisive. But the thing about it is, if we get a personal experience, so I even think a person is an experiencer, if, of course, if they're a contactee or an abductee, but even if they just saw a UFO. In my process of understanding experiencers, I've talked to a lot of people. Sometimes they've said to me, "You're the first person I ever talked to about this." And they just saw a UFO, and it just blew their mind, because they thought they were watching a satellite, and it does a 90-degree turn. And they know that's not possible. Or even a closer sighting. And they would tell me these stories, and they said, "Don't tell anybody," you know. So I don't. I honor that, you know, till they're ready to tell it for themselves. And this has happened to literally millions of people. So this experiencer path is not just I'm having my personal experience, but I believe it's the road to disclosure, because they know we have, you know, our paradigm galactic civilization buddies out there know we have a hierarchically managed society that's cut the whole ufology and extraterrestrial, extra-dimensional reality out of the picture. And so as a result, they've got to come about it a different way. And we've got to realize we're not the first planet this has ever happened to. It's our first time, in essence, in this, you know, part of history. But it's not their first time ever contacting a planet and helping to raise their consciousness. So they're sending individuals experiences. So if you just even see a UFO, I call it a weapon of mass instruction, you know, because it messes with your mind. It gets a little wedge in there to make you think. I also consider people who are not considering themselves experiencers, but they're researchers and they're looking into it, because they are looking at the evidence. They can be skeptical, that's fine. They are looking into it. And I honor that honest approach to trying to understand. One researcher I talked to recently said, "I've never had an experience, but I believe the preponderance of evidence does suggest that this phenomenon is real." And I appreciated his candor. And if someone says it's not real, that's fine too. What frustrates me and other experiencers that I've talked to is when they try to impose their authoritative whatever view onto your experience. That's a no-no in my book, because that is my experience, and that is your experience, and they weren't there. So that is a problem area, is that we have sort of an authority structure that wants to tell us what our experience is. And they can tell us about cases, they can tell us about what they're learning, but I draw a line there. And part of my drawing a line there has to do with my, as I mentioned before, being a domestic violence survivor, was I went to join support groups, and I went to counseling, and I processed my experience. But during the time that I was going through that movement, the domestic violence survivor movement, grew and grew and grew to a wonderful support system that allowed women to get away and to get into some kind of alternative housing, help them get away from their abuser, help to protect their information. I actually went through that system myself, and it was because other abusers had gone through that. They created a system of support. So we've had a number of groups come out in the last, I don't know, 30, 40 years, of different groups, the gay and lesbians groups, the domestic survivors groups, the sexual abuse groups. And I think the experiencers of all of these things that we're talking about today are the new group. We're now connected with each other and able to talk to each other. And now we have support groups developing and online support groups developing. And if you're by yourself with your experience and you really want to you know, have some help, look on Facebook, look around, try to find support groups online that are available, or something in your area, and there's a lot of them. And I think that's important. And there is an organization called the Foundation for Research into Extraterrestrial Encounters, FREE, free. That is a Facebook group that you can look up, free experiencers, and that they have a directory of support groups that you would be able to participate in. But you know, reach out. Get some help, or reach out to your contacts, you know, they will help you the most. That's what I found out was the beings that contacted me helped me the most through automatic writing and telepathic messages was what I learned the most about my experience and how to process it. They want to help us. Some of them don't, but that's okay. Put them aside for a minute because there's more that do, I believe. Some of the frightening experiences, you know, I'm going to be personally this year going into regression therapy. I'll share that because I have some things that are not necessarily scary or frightening, but just really confusing that I want to unravel for myself personally. I'm in that process. I wouldn't say I've completely arrived yet, you know. I'm a human being, right, developing and growing just like everyone else. But I wouldn't trade these experiences for anything. And that would be my time that I would like to go ahead and turn it back over to Jonah. Jonah, if you want to pick up, I want to thank everyone profusely for letting me have this time with you, with all of you. Thank you.
That we're going to